I had this live edge mirror hanging up at a restaurant here in Anchorage, Alaska, and someone contacted me and said that she really liked it and asked if I can make her one as well, but using these yellow cedar slabs that she has. The only problem is that they're a little bit too thin for what I like to use in this type of project, but you know me, I'm up for a challenge. Anyway, here's the story of her mirror. I'm cutting these to rough dimensions right now because I'll be doing final cuts later on in this build. And if you never worked with cedar before, it smells so good. I'm trimming these boards down a little bit because as is, they're a little bit too bulky looking and I'm looking for a more sleek look. And as you could tell, I'm being careful, but not too careful. Oopsie whoopsie. And off camera, I sent these boards through the jointer and planer to get them flat, aka I lost my footage. Sorry about that. And you want the bottom part to at least be flat because that's the one that's going to be sitting on top of the mirror. I end up slurring my words right here, but basically I'm taking this thickness block, which is the same thickness as my mirror, and I'm setting the blade to that height. The reason why I'm doing that is because I'm going to make rabbit cuts on the underside of this slab, because eventually this is where the mirror is going to sit at. See that? Sit at. They're going to fit into. I should be using my dado stack here, but I didn't have a throat plate for my table saw yet. However, as I'm recording this, I actually made one today, but it's a little bit too late. I'm doing the Starbond and painter's tape trick, which acts like a double-sided tape because I'm creating a support in the middle. Because when I get closer to the live edge, and if I don't have that support, it's going to tip into the blade and ruin the piece. And right here I'm cutting to final length, and I spent some time tuning up my saw because I wasn't getting square cuts, so I'm pretty happy to see this. After doing all that work, I realized that the pieces were too thin and I didn't like it, and I knew my client wouldn't like it, so I decided to laminate the two together to make one thick piece, and I took a third piece for the other side. So this is what I did. So I decided which board I wanted on top, and I took that piece and I sent it through the bandsaw to rip off that cleat, and I had to re-flatten the whole thing before I could glue them up. And I don't know what your glue up preferences are, but I like using glue in a French's yellow mustard bottle because they're cheap, they're easy to use, and actually quite effective. And I like using a nylon brush because it's easy cleanup. And for clamping, all I needed was the weight of the MDF board and a few scrap pieces, and that was plenty enough pressure. And after the glue was dry, I needed to cut off the excess off the front and the back, but I started off with the back and I did the Starbond trick. And you'll see what I did. And since I was eyeballing the tape, I decided to put the MDF in there, and I traced along the live edge so I can kind of get a rough idea of where to lay out my tape on this side, so I don't accidentally glue the live edge piece to the MDF. I didn't want to cut all the way to the bottom board just in case something went wrong, so I left a little bit of overhang, and I'm going to finish the rest off with a flush trim router bit. Since my goal is to make both of these boards look like one, I'm taking majority of the excess off at the bandsaw. And from there, I'm bringing it to my bench, and I'm using a flap disc on my grinder, and I'm trying to take out as much as I can, but also trying to blend the two together. So I switch over to my beefier Rotex to smooth it out a little bit, but also to remove the marks left behind the flap disc, and I'm using 120 grit right here. Then I do another switch to my finish sander, and I'm using 220 grit to smooth it out. And this is the other slab, which is the whole piece, and that's going to be the other side of the mirror. And before I go any further, I had to cut the boards that make up the frame for the behind the mirror. And I'm just doing rough cuts right now, and I'm going to do dry fits and do final measurements later. I'm just doing a layout right here because this is where I decided how I was going to construct the frame for behind this mirror. And also I get the exact measurements right here. And I'm using 1, 2, 3 blocks here, and the way they're set up, there are 2 inches. That way I don't have to do any math on the other side. I just bring them over and I'm already done. They're super convenient. I'm sanding these boards to finish right now, and I'm using 120 on my Rotex before I switch over to my finish sander. And since Cedar is so soft, I just used 150 grit, then I went to 220 and then I was done. And I know I look ridiculously awesome, but this was a video I made for my Instagram and TikTok account under Takuchi Furniture, and I'm rocking out to working for the weekend. I'm doing some final touch-ups, and I'm just softening the edges by hand and filling for any sharp spots and getting rid of those. And before I apply my finish, I like to take a blue shop towel and wipe off any excess dust. I'm using Odie's oil for my finish here because my client wanted a matte look, and I know that this produces that. However, I'm not the best at applying this, so you should probably not use my video for reference, but still an awesome product. And while I let the Odie's oil cure for a few hours, I work on the frame for the back of the mirror. And making pocket holes with the Craig jig make quick work of this. So these pocket holes will face the back side of the mirror, and you won't even see these at all. And I like to do a test run with my chamfer bit, that way I don't take too much off. So I'm putting a small chamfer around the outside and insides, that way when you're carrying the mirror you don't cut yourself on any sharp edges. And I forgot to put my logo on the back, so I had to take one of the pieces off and put in my laser. And sorry, since I don't have a special lens for my camera, I didn't want to take the chance to film this because I might burn my sensor or my lens. But here it is, about 2.5 minutes later. So the way I'm going to hang up this mirror is I'm going to use a French cleat, and I had this piece saved from my old shop. I'm just going to cut it to fit and attach 1/2 to the back of the mirror. And of course the other half goes onto the wall at the client's house.
Perfect.
So I'm using this clamp by Craig, which will allow me to align the pieces through one of the pocket holes. That way I can keep the boards aligned while I'm screwing it in. And here's my really awful attempt at trying to explain how the French cleat system works. But it's really hard to do with 2 hands, but trust me, it works. It's been about 4 hours since I applied this Odie's oil, and I just buff until when I run my fingers across it, I don't feel any wax on my fingers. And if you haven't used this stuff before, it smells so good. Mix that with Cedar. And I'm being very gentle handling this mirror because I cracked a mirror on a project before and it sucked. So the way I'm going to attach these boards to the mirror is I'm going to use clear silicone, because my thinking is that since wood always moves and silicone is malleable, that when it does move, it's not going to crack the mirror as if you were to use liquid nails. And the reason why I use clear silicone is because if there are any gaps between the wood and mirror, you won't see that in the reflection. And since this is already pre-finished, I wanted to use a towel to prevent scratches, but also I'm using a scrap piece of MDF, so when I clamp, I don't get any dents from the clamp pressure. And also, you don't want to clamp too tight, because if you do, you'll break the mirror. I know this because I've seen me do it before. And since I didn't have enough clamps that fit into my workbench, I decided to weigh down the board with a couple scraps as well as hardwoods that were pretty heavy, and that did the trick. For a little reassurance, I decided to put a little bit of silicone on the inside pieces, that way the mirror will have a little bit more sticking power. So when I attached the frame to the back of the mirror, I wanted it evenly spaced, but also created a little bit of gap at the top, and there's also a gap at the bottom because when you look at it from the front, you won't see the framework at all, which is what I wanted. Then I used a little bit of pin nails to hold it down in place, while I used trim head screws to fasten it down to the mirror. We're just doing a dry fit right here because those panels will actually be removed, drywalled, and plastered. And once that's done, this mirror could be hung up forever. The one cool thing about this, the way I set up this French cleat, is that you can slide this mirror left or right to adjust for center. And this is my yellow cedar live edge mirror. Thank you for watching.